Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Fifth Line Show of the regular season. We're done with the preseason. The games count now. The Panthers are down to their final 23, and they're on their way to Minnesota to take on the Wild to kick off their regular season. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good to hear. So, first off, the Panthers cut down to their final 23. Few housekeeping things to go over since our last episode. Grigory Denisenko did not make the final roster. He was placed on waivers and claimed by the Vegas Golden Knights. He is now with their AHL team after he was put on waivers for a second time and wasn't claimed. John Ludwig also got claimed off waivers by the Pittsburgh Penguins. He is on their NHL roster as an extra defenseman right now. And you have a couple of rookies making the Panthers roster with Mackie Samoskevich and Justin Sordiff. What are
And
your thoughts
Uwe
on
Zelenskis.
Oh yeah, he's 26.
Technically is a rookie.
He's a rookie too. NHL rookie. He's played quite a few years in the Czech league, but 26-year-old rookie Uvis Balinski is also another rookie who cracked the roster.
Yeah, we came on the last show and we kind of teased what we thought was gonna happen, and pretty much everything we said that was gonna happen didn't happen. We said Denisenko wasn't gonna get put on waivers. He got put on waivers. At least I said that. We weren't entirely sure if Balinski's was gonna. We both thought, I believe, that he was going to the AHL, and then he played 3 more preseason games after that, and he really worked through the camp and through the preseason, and he did come out the best seventh defenseman. Casey Fitzgerald does go down on waivers, as well as Zach Dalpe. They both passed through, and they're both in Charlotte, so those are good guys to have as options to call up, because not only are they familiar with the NHL, they're familiar with Mo's system, and they've been on the team for their entire playoff run. So that's another thing that's important to note. Spencer Knight went to the AHL. He doesn't have to pass through waivers. So he's going down there to get good quality games, while Stolarz backs up Bobrovsky in the NHL. Stenlin and Lorentz both make their roster. That has to do with them sending down Dalpe, them not keeping Denisenko. That opened up that 13th forward spot for Stenlin and Lorentz. You can say whoever got it. They're both going to be playing opening night because Sam Bennett is out of the lineup. So that is some housekeeping stuff. In about 24 hours, just a little bit under that, game 1 will begin.
Yeah. You got Mackey making the roster after putting up 6 points in 6 preseason games. He looks ready, and he will make his NHL debut on Thursday against the Minnesota Wild. He'll be on a line with Anton Lundell and Sam Reinhart. So you got a couple of guys that can dish him the puck. He has the speed to keep up with them. He has the hands to create his own space there, and he has a nice shot. So I think that line will look pretty good together on Thursday. That's where he's making his NHL debut. Justin Sordiff is not likely to make his NHL debut. He's going to be joining the team as an extra forward, but he's not going to slide in just yet because they're going to rock with the original top 2 lines and that 4th line of Ryan Lomberg, Kevin Stenlund, and Steven Lorentz.
Yeah, when the original rosters came out, because every NHL team needed to send their rosters in, Panthers went 22 instead of 23. Excuse me. That was pretty much, as we were told, just a way to get around, not to get around the cap, but they were at pretty much the cap limit, about 490K with that 22 roster. Then a little bit later in the day, they did move Aaron Ekblad, I believe, his contract to LTIR, which freed up around $7 million of additional cap relief. And Justin Sordiff's on an entry-level deal, so more than enough relief there to cover his contract. So now they're at the ceiling of 23. At the moment of this recording, I don't think Brett Ritchie has signed anywhere. Last time we talked to Paul Maurice about Brett Ritchie, he did say that they did talk to Ritchie. Ritchie has a couple options. One of that was to stay within the organization, but that might have had to have gone through Charlotte. And at the point in Brett Ritchie's career, if there's NHL jobs guaranteed open elsewhere, maybe that makes a little bit more sense than having to battle out in Charlotte, where he still might not be the first or second or even third call up. So that's pretty much it for the housekeeping and the roster updates.
Yeah, I mean, it should be interesting to see what Brett Ritchie's situation is. But the thing with Florida is that so many of those forwards that they had that are NHL quality cleared waivers at the point where they don't necessarily need Brett Ritchie in the organization. And then there's probably guys that will get a look before him, like a Will Lockwood or Alex True or Zach Dalpe, of course, sticks around
And
after
then
clearing
once,
waivers.
as Colby said, Justin Sordiff, he's the 14th guy right now, like, or 13th guy when Bennett's not there. So pretty much the 14th forward. So he's the injury backup at the moment. So there's a couple guys that are going to be ahead of Brett Ritchie, right?
Yeah, I think sort of stay up in Florida is going to be short because I do want him playing those top 6 minutes in Charlotte. And then it just depends on what happens with Sam Bennett, how long Sam Samoskevich is going to be up there. Is it does seem like they still want Kachuk to play with Cousins, and maybe there isn't that spot in the top 6 open once Bennett comes back. But we'll have to see how Samoskevich plays in those first few regular season games as far as how long his NHL stay will be. But he has a real chance to prove that he can stick around, and he earned it after having a really good camp, fighting through Paul Maurice's notoriously rough camp and having himself a good preseason game. He'll get his first taste of NHL action tomorrow.
Yeah, the young guys were pretty impressive. I think sort of did have a good preseason, and as the preseason continued on, I'm like, it makes sense for him to go to the AHL and play. But dang, like he had a really good camp into the latter half of the preseason, and he deserved the call up. I mean, he might not get into a game, especially since we're still waiting for Bennett to come back, and he's definitely going to be going back to the AHL sooner than later, so he can play those top 6 minutes, as Colby said. But he truly did earn one of those spots because he had a phenomenal camp.
Yeah, for sure.
And now the Panthers are in Minnesota. They're starting the first of 3 games on the road to start the season. And well, the boys liked that last year when they were playing on their run to the Stanley Cup final. Talked to Forsling 2 days ago. We said, I do like starting on the road because that's what we did in the playoffs. Home opener will be October 19th against Toronto. But first, they have Minnesota, then Winnipeg, and then Jersey should be the last game on that 3-game road trip. So that's all coming this week, starting tomorrow in Minneapolis.
Getting Minnesota and Winnipeg out of the way early is good for the guys too. So you're not going there when it's like negative 20 degrees in December like they usually do. So I think the schedule makers threw them a little bit of a bone there.
And also the time differences. Obviously, if you get thrown into like maybe a central time zone and then an east and a west in the middle of the year, like your travel and sleep schedule is just a little bit more off. You get to start over on that side of the Americas and then work your way back to the east time zone and then get your home opener. So not only is it not as cold, so it's a little bit good for the crew on the travel, but you get those games out of the way early, like Colby said.
Yeah, for sure. Should be an interesting week around the league, and already had a couple NHL games start today and yesterday. As we're speaking, about 30 minutes ago, Connor Bedard scored his first NHL goal on a nice little picked up his own rebound and had a little wraparound there. Maybe he's already looking good in Chicago, and have a couple more action. You saw the Vegas Golden Knights lift their Stanley Cup banner yesterday. So some interesting storylines around the league. I mean, want to jump right into our predictions for this season?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you go first.
So I'm not a big prediction guy. I refuse to predict anything in the playoffs last year because every time I predict something, I am the worst at predictions. So instead of me blatantly telling you who I think is going to win the cup, I'll give you a couple teams that I think are going to be impressive this year and you should watch out for. Starting off the bat, I do think Carolina is another team just to look out for. Again, every single year they're making it to deeper in the playoffs. They're going to conference finals. They have a good coaching staff there with Brindamore, and he runs it well. And if you look at the Eastern Conference Finals last year, even though they got swept, it was all 1-goal games. And when Svechnikov comes back, they're getting their best goal scorer. They've added a couple guys in the offseason. So I think Carolina is one team that I would look out for. Don't bat your eye at Florida. I think they have a deeper team forward-wise, top to bottom. And then when you get Ekblad and Montour back sooner than later, around December-ish, then you're going to have a pretty I think you're going to have a stronger decor than you had last year in the Stanley Cup final because you're switching Mark Stauffer and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. You're bringing back another year of Josh Mahura. You have Kulikov and Mikkola. You do lose Radko Gudas, but you're bringing in a lot more pieces. So I think it is a deeper team this year. And let's go one more team. Colorado. I think Colorado is going to be another juggernaut again. Colorado, Vegas, they're still really good teams. Pittsburgh, they have guys that have made deep runs, so those are a couple teams I would look out for.
Well, I'll give you my Eastern team and my Western team, and then I'll tell you who I think is going to win the Stanley Cup. So, out East, I think New Jersey has a team to make the run this year. I mean, they had a young team that looked pretty good in the playoffs last year against the Rangers. Goaltending wasn't quite there, but I think another year under Akira Schmid's belt will help him out. And I mean, you got a really deep core around 2 stars and Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. And I mean, teams always need that good 1-2 punch down the middle to make a run. So I think New Jersey has a deep team. Lindy Ruff runs a good system there. It looked really good in the playoffs against the Rangers, kind of stalled out against the Hurricanes a little bit. But, I mean, another year for that young team, I think they'll make a run to the Cup final. And then, I mean, I said this last year, and I guess I'll say it again. I think I like the Edmonton Oilers out of the West. I mean, you can't say no to a team that has Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on it, and they really did a good job filling out that roster. Matthias Ekholm in particular fills out that defense group nicely. He's a very good defensive defenseman. And then another year of Evan Bouchard running that power play is going to help a lot too. He's quickly growing into a really good defenseman for them. So I think Edmonton finally has a juice to win the Stanley Cup with Connor McDavid on the roster.
So you got 2 teams that have never been to the Cup final that are going head to head in the Cup final. That's not a bad one, eh?
You're just saying the core because Edmonton and
Or
New
I
Jersey
mean, obviously,
have...
you know, New Jersey and Edmonton. None of those guys are on the roster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's like those 2 franchises have about
we know.
10 Stanley Cups in their cupboard combined.
I do think that Edmonton is a team that feels like they should have had more deeper runs than they had. New Jersey were awful a couple years ago, and that they got top picks to show for it. And they have really good young players, and I really like Nico, and I really like Jack. And you know, we'll see what happens with Luke Hughes, but they got other weapons around that team too. You got Schmid. I like Siegenthaler on the back end. Timo Meyer is going to have another full year under them. Like New Jersey is a sleeper team, in my opinion. And I think they could make a run. I say sleeper, but they're a good team.
Oh yeah, I mean when you look at the Metropolitan Division, them and Carolina are pretty far above the pack there.
Yeah.
Then you have that pack of the Rangers, Islanders, Penguins, and maybe the Capitals fighting for that 3rd spot. So I think that can help them going into the playoffs, that they're not going to be in too much of a dogfight. But we'll see how things go.
Yeah, I just think when I'm looking at teams that I think will make deep runs in the playoffs, they usually, like traditionally in the last couple of years, there's teams that have consistently made second, third round, maybe cup finals. I mean, Vegas has had multiple deep playoff runs. Florida, they did win the President's Trophy. They did make it to the second round. They did have a couple playoff spurts with this core, and then they finally got far enough to where they can play for the Stanley Cup. We haven't seen that with New Jersey. We really haven't seen that with Edmonton. But
No,
as we
you
saw
have seen that with Edmonton, though. They've made a
they made
handful
one.
of conference final runs in the last couple of years. They were in the conference final last year. All right, now they were the second round
Second
against
round,
Dallas, and
yeah.
then I
Last year
think
was
when
Dallas,
the
Vegas.
year before they were in the conference
I
final
think
against
I
Colorado.
think they made it. Was it 1 year?
Yeah, it was the year Colorado
Yeah.
won it. They played
So
Colorado in the conference final 2
I
years
think it was
ago.
1 year they made it to the conference final. So that's what I said. It seems like Edmonton has made deeper runs than they have. And that's why I think Edmonton is a team that could take the next step. And I mean, you have two of the best playoff players in the league. Like Draisaitl and McDavid consistently are some of the best playoff players in the league, regular season players. They're too good of players to not be in the cup final. So I can be with you on that. I think they're another team that could make the cup final.
Yeah, just the one thing with Edmonton for me is their goaltending has a bit of a question mark, but I think Stuart Skinner can figure it out this year and be even better than he was last year. So I don't think that question mark sticks around for that much longer. But that Jack Campbell contract is pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, and we saw with Vegas last year, like random goalies can get hot because Aiden Hill wasn't their number one to start the year. He wasn't their number two. He jumped in with a couple injuries, and they go on away and they win the Stanley Cup. So, a goalie Bob got hot last year for the Panthers. That's why they made the Cup final. Aiden Hill was very hot in the Cup final. I mean, Edmonton, their goalie can get hot. Other team, their goalie can get hot. We'll see. I once again, I don't watch too much of the West to really like pinpoint exactly who I think will go to the Cup final. Whereas the East, I'm a little bit more confident. Like these are the teams that I can see as contenders.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Pacific Division in particular, it's a pretty weak division past Edmonton, Seattle, and LA. And maybe Calgary can be a team that can surprise people. I mean, they're going to be under a system that works much better for that team. So I think they can bounce back from their rough season last year. But I think the East is just deeper, and that's kind of where Vegas kind of ran with it, and is they weren't facing as much of a dogfight as some of these Eastern teams were, to where they're coming in tired. So I think that's one thing to take a look at, is that the depth of the Western Conference isn't necessarily as good as the East. And I know I just listed off Pacific Division teams, and I didn't list off the Vegas Golden Knights. But I mean, when you look at the Atlantic Division, for example, you have the Florida Panthers, obviously, the Boston Bruins, who had 120 points last year, but are missing a lot of good players.
Yeah,
After
no Hall, no
Bergeron,
Bergeron, no
Krejci,
Krejci.
Taylor Hall all left, but they're still going to be a pretty decent team.
Yeah,
You
like
got
like Colby, you mentioned, we talked about a couple teams in the West. Another team's Dallas, which have been to conference finals, Stanley Cup finals. It's another team that I don't want to count out. But top to bottom, I think there might be like 10 teams that, once again, in the East that are not going to be separated by that much and can make runs. I mean, Buffalo, there's a good chance they can make the playoffs. Ottawa's gotten better. Detroit's really stacked up their team. Like the East is going to be very, very down to the wire as it was last year with the Panthers getting in with just a few points, 1 point to spare.
Yeah, and I mean there's injuries across the division as well. You got Toronto missing Jake Muzzin for a good chunk of the year. He's on LTIR.
Is he not out the whole year?
I think he might be out the whole year. I don't know the.
I know Matt Murray's out the whole year.
Yeah, and I know Jake Muzzin's on LTIR for Toronto. You got Ekblad and Montour both expected to miss a couple of months for Florida. You got Andre Vasilevsky on LTIR for the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I mean, even if the teams at the top are coming into the season kind of battered up.
Yeah, the NHL season is a very interesting one. And once you get to the dance, then it really is any team can win. So that's they're way too early looking into it predictions before most teams have even played a game. But just based off of what teams have done in the off season, those are a couple to look at.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you wanted to go over, or you think we should be good for today?
Yeah, we should be good. We have the roster updates. The games finally start. So when we record next, it should be the day before the home opener. So we'll have the 3 games in the bank, and then we'll get on to this.
Alrighty, have a good one, guys.
And a happy birthday to Colby I.
Yeah, that is about 3 hours from now. So, yeah, have a good one, guys.
And